Part 13, Chapter 7. What do you think? Parker was leaning as close as he could, sweating along with Brett, as the latter attempted to seal the delicate last connections within the cramped confines of 12 module. They were trying to perform work that normally employed the services of a remote automatic tracer and the facilities of a computerized tool runner. Since they possessed neither runner nor tracer, they were forced to cope with the trouble utilizing instruments not designed for the purpose. Wrong tools for the wrong job, Parker thought angrily. Somehow they would have to manage. Unless 12 module was properly repaired and made operative once more, they'd have one hell of a time trying to lift off. To get away from this world, Parker would have made the necessary internal replacements with his teeth. Right now, though, it was Brett's turn to fight with the recalcitrant components. Like every other instrument aboard the Nostromo, the module used snap-in, factory-sealed replacement parts. The trick was to remove the ruined garbage without interrupting other critical functions or damaging still more delicate portions of the ship's drive. The new parts would fit in easily if they could only get rid of the carbonized junk. "I think I've got it," his companion finally said. "Give it a try." Parker stepped back, touched two buttons set into the overhead console, then glanced hopefully at a neighboring portable monitor. He tried the buttons a second time, without success. The monitor remained blissfully silent. Nothing. Damn, I was sure that was it. Well, it isn't. Try the next one. I know they all look okay, except for that number 43, and we've already replaced that. That's the trouble with these damn particle cells. If the regulator overloads and burns some of them out, you have to go inside and find the ones that have vacuum failed. He paused, added, "I wish we had a tracer. You and me both." Soft sounds of metal scratching on plastic sounded from inside the unit. "It's got to be the next one." Parker tried to sound optimistic. "We don't have to hand-check every single cell. Mother narrowed it down this far. Be thankful for small favors." "I'll be thankful," Brett responded. "I'll be thankful when we're off this rock and back in hypersleep." "Stop thinking about Kane." He touched the two buttons, cursed slightly. "Another blank. Try the next one, Brett." "Right." He moved to do so, replaced the cell he'd just checked in its proper place. Parker adjusted several overhead toggles. Maybe they could narrow down the injured line a little farther. 12 module contained 100 of the tiny particle acceleration cell chambers. The thought of manually checking every one of them to find a single one that had failed made him more than ready to break things. At precisely the wrong moment, a voice called from a nearby comm speaker. "What's happening?" Oh hell, Parker thought. Ripley, that damn woman. I'll tell her what's happening. "My Johnson is happening," he informed her curtly, adding several things pitched just below the effective range of the Omni pickup. "Keep working," he told his companion. "Right." "What's that?" she said. "I didn't catch that." He moved away from the module. A stab activated the comm amp. "You want to know what's happening? A lot of hard work is happening. That's what's happening. Real work. You ought to come back here and give it a try sometime." Her reply was instant, composed. "I've got the toughest job on this ship." Parker laughed derisively. I have to listen to your bullshit. Get off my back. I'll get off your back when Module 12 is fixed, not before. You can count on that. There was a click at the other end before Parker could offer his ready comment. What's up? Brett leaned out of the module. You two fighting again? Nah. Smart mouth broad, that's all. Brett hesitated, paused to examine the currently open cell. Right. Let's try it again. Parker pushed the buttons, examined the monitor, thought of putting his fist through it while imagining it to be a certain warrant officer's face. He wouldn't do anything nearly so melodramatic, of course. Though short-tempered, he was sensible enough to realize how badly he needed the monitor. And Ripley. Ash was running a new battery of tests on Kane's comatose form. They provided additional information about his condition. None of it was particularly useful, but the science officer found it all fascinating. Kane's insides were immediately visible to anyone who cared to enter the infirmary and have a look at the main medical view screen. Kane himself was in no position to object to this particularly intimate invasion of privacy. Ripley walked in, took note of the readouts. His condition hadn't changed since she'd last seen him. She hadn't expected it to. The alien remained affixed to his face. She studied the smaller readouts, then took the empty seat next to Ash. He acknowledged her arrival with a slight smile and did not turn from his console. Making some different tests on him, he informed her, just in case anything happens. Like what? I haven't the vaguest idea, but if anything does, I'll want to know about it as soon as it starts. Anything new? With Kane? Ash considered, marshalling his thoughts. Still the same. He's holding steady. No, better than that. He's holding strong. No changes for the worse. What about the creature? We now know it can leak acid and heal itself fast. Anything else we know? Ash sounded pleased with himself when he replied, Like I told you, I've been running tests. Since we can't do anything for Kane, I thought it sensible to try to learn as much as we can about the creature. You never know what seemingly insignificant discovery might lead to its eventual removal. I know that. She shifted impatiently in her chair. What have you found out? It's got an outer layer of what appears to be protein polysaccharides. At least that's my best guess. Hard to tell without a piece for detailed analysis, and attempting to remove even a small sample might cause it to drain fluid again. We can't risk it dissolving part of the autodock. Not hardly, she said dryly. Right now that machine's the only chance Kane's got. Exactly. What's more interesting than that is that it's constantly sloughing off cells within a secondary internal dermis and replacing them with polarized organic silicates. It appears to have a double skin, with that acid flowing between the two layers. Also, the acid seems to be flowing under high pressure. It's a good thing Dallas didn't cut too deeply with that knife, or I think it would have sprayed the entire infirmary. Ripley looked properly impressed. The silicate layer demonstrates a unique, very dense molecular structure under the scope. It might even be capable of resisting the laser. I know, he said in response to her look of disbelief. That sounds crazy. But this is the toughest chunk of organic material I've ever seen. The combination of the way those cells are aligned with what they're composed of adds up to something that defies all the rules of standard biology. Those silicated cells, for example, they're metal bonded. The result is what gives the creature such resistance to adverse environmental conditions. Anything new besides the silicates and the double dermis? Well, I still have no idea what it breathes, or even if it breathes in the way we think of standard respiration. It does seem to be altering the atmosphere around it, perhaps absorbing whatever gases it requires through numerous surface pores. There's certainly nothing resembling a nostril. As a living chemical factory, it surpasses in efficiency anything I've ever heard of. Some of its internal organs don't seem to function at all, while others are doing things I can't begin to guess at. It's possible the visually quiescent organs have defensive functions. We'll find out if we ever have to provoke it further. He cocked an expectant eye at her. That enough for you? Plenty. Kane shouldn't have been brought back on board, she mused. They should have left him and the creature outside. Ash was the one responsible for them being here. She studied the science officer unobtrusively, watching him work his instruments, store pleasing results, and discard those he had no use for. Ash was the last member of the crew she'd have suspected of being capable of a dramatic gesture. Yet he was the one who'd made the sudden decision to let the explorers back aboard, going against all accepted procedure. She had to correct herself. In addition to Ash, Dallas and Lambert had also gone against procedure in demanding admittance. And Kane's life had been at stake. Suppose Ash had obeyed her directive and left the three outside. Would Kane still be alive? Or would he now just be a statistic in the log? That would have simplified one thing, though. She wouldn't have to face Kane when he recovered and have to explain why she tried to refuse him and the others admittance. Ash noticed her expression, looked concerned. Something the matter? No. She sat up straighter. Sum it all up for me. Pretend I'm as dumb as I sometimes feel. What's it all mean? Where do we stand with it? Interesting combination of elements and structure make it practically invulnerable given our present situation and resources. She nodded. That's exactly how I read it, if your results are accurate. He looked pained. Sorry. Okay, so it's invulnerable. She was watching him closely. Is that why you went ahead and let it in? As always, the science officer refused to be baited. He showed nothing in the way of resentment when he replied, I was following a direct order from the captain, remember? She forced herself to keep from raising her voice, knowing that Ash respected only reason. When Dallas and Kane are off the ship, I'm senior officer. I'm acting commander until one or the other actually sets foot back inside. Yes, of course. I forgot, that's all. The emotions of the moment. Like hell. His attention remained fixed to various readouts. Emotions never made you forget anything. That made him turn to her. You think you know all about me. All of you. You're so sure you know exactly what kind of person I am. Let me tell you something, Ripley. When I opened the inner hatch, I was aware of what I was doing, yes. But that business about who's in charge when, well, maybe I'm capable of forgetfulness just like anyone else. My memory's very good, but it's subject to failure like anyone's. Even a mechanical memory like Mother's can lose track of information. Failure, sure, she thought. Selective failure. Still, the science officer could be telling the truth. She'd better watch out how many of her shipmates she insulted. Parker and Brett already felt something less than love for her, and now she was on the verge of making an enemy of Ash. But she couldn't still the suspicions. She almost wished Ash would get mad at her. You also managed to forget the Science Division's own basic quarantine law, something that's drilled into every ship's officer early in flight school. No. At last, she thought, a statement she could believe. That I didn't forget. I see. You didn't forget. She paused for emphasis. You just went ahead and broke it. You think I did it lightly? That I didn't consider the possible consequences of my action? No, Ash. I'd never think that. Again, he didn't react to provocation. I didn't like having to do it, but I saw myself as having no choice. He explained softly. What would you have done with Kane? His only chance to stay alive seemed to rest with getting him into the infirmary, where the autodoc could work on him as soon as possible. His condition has been stabilized. I'm inclined to give credit for that to the machine and its rapid treatment, the early application of antisepsis and intravenous feeding. You're contradicting yourself, Ash. A minute ago, you said it was the creature who was keeping him alive, not the autodoc. The creature does seem to be making a contribution, but it's doing so in Kane's atmosphere and environment. We've no way of knowing what it might have done if left alone with him outside. Here, we can keep a close watch on his system and be ready to compensate if the creature shows signs of acting inimically towards him. We couldn't do that if he was still outside. He paused long enough to throw a switch, check a reading. Besides, it was a direct order. Meaning you'll listen to Dallas over me no matter what the situation. Meaning the captain's the captain, and the fact that he was 1 meter outside the corridor instead of inside isn't reason enough for me to start ignoring his decisions. She looked away, furious with him and with herself. By breaking quarantine procedure, you risk everybody's life, not just Kane's. Ash moved smoothly to punch out a request on the computer board, stared solemnly at the information provided. He spoke without facing the insistent Ripley. You think it was an easy decision for me to make? I'm aware of the rules regarding quarantine and alien life forms, probably more than you. I had to balance them against a man's life. Maybe I should have let him die out there. Maybe I have jeopardized the rest of us. But I know one thing. Rule makers always draw up their own precious rules and regulations in safety and comfort, not out in the field, where those same absolutes are supposed to be applied. At those times, we have to rely on our own minds and feelings. That's what I did. So far, the creature hasn't made a threatening gesture towards any of the rest of us. It may do so later on, in which case it will be facing an alarmed and ready group of 6 instead of an unprepared single man stumbling through the dark hold of an unfamiliar vessel. I'll balance that risk against Kane's life. His fingers danced over the console. I don't dispute your personal feelings. Ripley shifted her weight to her left, rose. I'm simply saying you have no right or authority to impose them on the rest of us. Maybe we don't feel like taking the same risk. It doesn't matter now. Kane's aboard and alive. Events will proceed from that reality, not from past alternatives. It's a waste of time discussing them. This is your official position then, as science officer. Not exactly right out of the manual. You are being repetitive, Ripley. Why? To provoke me? I have already voluntarily entered my actions in my official log, and will subject myself to whatever decision the company may make in the matter. Yes, it's my official position. Remember that the prime consideration of science is the protection and betterment of human life. I would never contravene that. No, but your idea of what betters human life might differ from someone else's. For some reason, that caused him to turn and stare at her sharply, when her other, more direct probes had produced no response. I take my responsibility as science officer as seriously as you do that of warrant officer. That should be sufficient for you. I'm tired of this. If you have a specific accusation to make, lodge it with Dallas. If not... And he turned back to his precious instrumentation. You do your job, and I'll do mine. She nodded once. Fair enough. Turning, she headed for the corridor, still unsatisfied, but unsure why. Ash's answers had the veneer of validity, were hard to argue with. That wasn't what was troubling her. It was the fact that his action in popping the lock to let the exploration team inside went against much more than the rules. It went against every facet of the science officer's personality, directly contradicted his demonstrated professionalism in other matters. She hadn't known him that long, but until this incident he'd given her, and everyone else aboard, the impression that for him nothing ranked above the official science manual. Ash claimed he'd done what he'd done only to save a man's life. She'd taken the official side. Was she wrong? Would Kane have agreed with her? She headed for the bridge, much troubled in mind. Little bits of coincidence swam in her head, nagging at her thoughts. The mind glue to bring them together remained missing. There was nothing to do on the Nostromo now but wait. Wait for Parker and Brett to complete their work. Wait for a change in Kane's condition.